Hello, and welcome to Takes One to Write One. I'm Katherine Arcady, and I'm a writer. However, my characters are everything but. While research gives me information about their jobs and lifestyles, it doesn't give me the first-hand experience needed to write a well-rounded character. So I created this podcast where I invite people on to talk about their jobs, their hobbies, or their beliefs, because it takes one to write one. This is part 2 of a 3-part series for pilots. I'm talking to Marco and Nate, who have a combined 17 years of experience in the aviation industry. Let's continue to learn about what it's like to be a pilot, because it takes one to write one. We talked about the social culture. We talked about the personality types that you approach. What are typical emotions that you yourself go through? Be it anger, frustration, bliss. What's a sort of something that you experience on the daily, or that you would hope to experience on the daily, but instead you get XYZ?
Without painting a target on my back. I would say that it can vary, most definitely. I mean, there's some days where you just want to throttle someone. But, you know, it's a lot of the days is going to be a day where it's just, it's a lot of fun. You're having a good day. Everyone, you disagree?
No. I spend most of my days looking out the window, and I sit back and I think,
ha, my 4th grade teacher was wrong.
yes. No, like, this is the best job in the world.
Absolutely.
It is.
And sometimes it's easy to kind of lose that when things get frustrating or they don't work out your way. But
it really is.
This is the best job in the world.
But at the end of the day, you can't help but think, like, if you're in between, like, 2 cloud layers, you know, and how pretty the scenery is, and nobody else is, like, getting to see this, right? Now, I will never post these pictures because...
That you don't have, that you're not showing
No,
us.
like, I can show them because nobody's seeing them, but, you know, us. But, like, I'll show Katie...
The sun in the morning or the evening playing off the clouds or the mountains.
Morning sunrise, coming into Detroit, coming over the lake. Here's one coming through a rain shower, going into Detroit on an arrival.
Wow, that looks like an alien spaceship that's approaching a different planet. Now, why is it that you won't post it?
Coming through the clouds?
Yeah, God coming through.
Sure.
Why is it that you won't post it?
You can't post that because no passenger wants to see a pilot on their phone as their...
Sure. FAA mandate if you're on an island.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's illegal.
I see.
I caught this one in St. Vincent on the ramp.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
That's just straight photo.
Yeah, that was one shot. Yeah, you've got the dark blue on the one side and then the light peering through on the other.
Nate, that's amazing.
I got a really good one here. So it's called St. Elmo's Fire, and it was first observed through the masts of the sails when they would, come across the pond, and they would observe static coming off of the masts. I don't know how or why, but that's the extent that I know of it. Mm-hmm. This is what it looks like.
Wow, even at that speed, huh? 10, 15 knots?
Wow. And here I was just thinking it was an 80s movie. That is so neat.
Yeah.
It's
one of the more unique things, and it happens quick when it's in the flight deck.
Oh yeah.
Is that a danger to you?
No, it's just static discharge.
Well, I don't know about you, but does this screw with your comms at all?
All right. So this is when it gets down to like the rumor mill,
because it would sound like for us, it would sound like someone was scratching a record in my headset.
I've heard of people seeing like a faint neon blue glow in the cockpit before the lightning would happen. For us, I haven't seen either the comms, or I haven't seen the visual effects of either. So
Would passengers view this?
passengers
or is it...
won't see that.
Okay.
The windshield has. God, I don't even know how to explain this. I don't know how the heating element is, and I say this.
It's
uneducated,
because
wired.
The different coating and stuff on the windshield, and then also
Right.
the electrical nodes that
The windscreen is heated, and there's electrical current going through it, and so there's static discharge that happens when flying through the clouds, which consist of like protons and electrons, right, which are trying to figure out how to produce lightning themselves. So it's
electrons are
Really?
trying to flow to the proton. Yeah.
Oh, you want to get into it?
Oh, okay, yeah, you want to
Go ahead.
You
No, yeah.
Subatomic science. Let's talk about it.
Tell me what you know.
Anyways, actually, you ever been struck by lightning?
I can't say I have. All I know is stick my ass in
We-
the air.
we were flying out of Mexico one time. The one,
You mean in
the one cloud, the one cloud in the sky, and we're flying through it, and all of a sudden, boom! And like
Struck by lightning?
I'm looking at my buses, I'm seeing like a little electrical surge there, but like nothing trips. It's like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
Anyways, it got hit by lightning. But there's another fun fact there for you. The windscreens are heated not because of the cold temperatures at altitude, but the main idea behind it is to make it more elastic for when a bird hits it.
Is that so?
Yeah.
How often do you approach birds while in flight?
I've got
There's
one.
somebody-
I smoked two
Ooh.
seagulls going into Cedar Rapids. I mean,
Beach rats.
there were 4 of them and 2 made it.
Oh.
Yeah.
This was flying at what altitude?
Oh, we're just about to touch down and
Oh,
land.
okay. So you're not seeing any birds up yonder because they don't fly that
exist,
high,
but-
right?
The
Very
FAA
rarely.
says nothing below or nothing above 10,000, but
That's
there are most
bullshit.
definitely are birds
That's
that go
absolute
above that
bullshit because
threshold.
I've seen birds above 10.
I had a really cool experience flying into La Crosse, Wisconsin one time. We were on final for the runway, and we had 2 bald eagles off our left side flying almost in formation with us. I mean, it was
Oh,
like one
that's
of the most
neat.
superb experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, that was one of the things in Colorado when I was flying prop planes was we would continuously see 2 bald eagles on the west side of the airfield. And I was telling my students, I was like, don't hit those. Like,
You hit
just
the-
take it out a little bit wider. You know?
Surrender your license.
No, it's not surrender your license, but there's a lot of paperwork that goes into it. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was my question. They're like federally protected, right?
Yes.
And it's,
They're our
but if
country's bird. You know, like you gotta.
Well, if they throw themselves
Yeah,
into
do you
a
hate America?
If they throw themselves into a blender that's moving at 10,000 rotations a minute, then whose fault is that?
You know, not ours, but at the same time, the government doesn't understand that, more or less.
Well, because, flying an airplane and flying a desk, oh my god, I'm so going to get my license pulled.
Right,
We're just
because
gonna stop
the
that.
AC is always cool, and the roller chair always rolls, and the coffee is always hot, and the management's office. That's not always the case on a flight deck.
I see. So I'm hearing about eagles flying beside you and these beautiful weather-related experiences. Is there anything else that really gets you excited about piloting and aviation that just makes your job fucking worth it?
Man, I'll tell you what, sometimes when you know you're with a crew, like a solid crew of like
Oh, yeah.
dudes you love flying with, there's nothing like is like more like exciting than that. 'Cause, like,
There are 2 things that really bring it together for me. Flying with old flight instructors in the jet, which I just got to do on this past trip, and I'm getting ready to do on this next trip, back to back. Super excited. We were laughing and just having a great time the whole time. Unfortunately, during that time, he's going through line check pilot training, so a couple turns were taken away from him, and other captains stepped in that were not as fun. But when we got back together for those 3 days, it was just a freaking blast. That I've passed off an airplane to an old student of mine just recently in Saginaw. And I was like, Chad, is that you? He's like, oh, I thought you wouldn't recognize me. I'm like, what is going on? And it was so awesome just seeing him like in a uniform and, just being able to, see that, hey, one of my students has made it. Even though we might not have kept in touch, as much as I have with my old flight instructors because we spent a very brief period of time together. Some flight instructors stick with students for years at a time.
Okay.
The other thing I've had the opportunity to do is do dog rescues for pilots and paws. That, to this day, was the most rewarding flying that I've done. And I still have the opportunity to go back and do the rescue flights. But it's difficult to do with the schedule that I have now. But I will go back. It's not a matter of when, or not a matter of if, but when.
That's cool. What's involved with that?
Oh, so Pilots and Paws is a nonprofit organization where volunteers, general aviation,
it would be helpful, I imagine.
General aviation candidates go to destinations where there are high volume kill shelters. They'll load up their aircraft and they will fly them to locations where those dogs will be adopted or fostered.
Neat.
It was amazing. So a popular destination for us was Dodge City, Kansas. My record is in the high 40s. And
Of dogs?
Of dogs, yeah. And I did about the low 40s hours as far as flight time. I did low 40s for volunteering for Pilots and Paws. It was a good time.
That's so neat. So
and we would take the little munchkins, like the little buns, like the little puppies, and we'd bring them up to the flight deck, and we'd play with puppies the entire flight.
Well, you want to talk about charity missions. I've had to, from Miami to San Martin, had to fly tens of millions of dollars of luxury watches to guys that needed them.
Ooh.
That day.
Emergency
in
case.
San Martin on their yachts. And you know what? That's something I take pride in.
You mentioned
PFM right there.
PFM, yeah.
You're fucking magic.
That's what we have. You mentioned seeing one of your former students in uniform.
Yeah.
What is the typical dress of those in either piloting or aviation? Does it vary based on what plane you're flying or what airline?
Yeah, it depends on the airline. You typically wear the white shirt. It has the bars on the shoulders. So the person who sits in the right seat, the first officer, they have 3 bars on their shoulder. The captain wears 4 bars on their shoulder, and we call those epaulets.
And if he's got a star on there, then you don't want to mess with that guy.
No.
What does a star mean?
Well, that used to be like the chief pilot thing.
Oh, no, I don't know if we do that.
And if he's got those old Napoleonic epaulets, then
Yeah. So the kind of like the other thing too is, you see the guys wearing hats or maybe aviators, or what are the other glasses?
Wayfarers.
Wayfarers.
I feel like wayfarers and aviators are like the glasses.
Typically, right.
Which I have both of. Thank you very much.
I do not, but. The kind of the stereotype that I see is when you're a new hire, your epaulets, ours are gold, right? And they are bright, and they are shiny, and they are new. People who have been around, theirs are dull and not a whole lot of color. And those shoulder harnesses that we have to wear for different phases of flight they're black, and so they create this like crust or dust on the epaulets. So the darker they are, the longer that person's been around.
Interesting. So you don't polish it. You
man,
don't.
No, you
It's
don't really
fabric.
polish it. Yeah, it's fabric.
Oh,
so
okay.
like
I should have brought some over just as an example.
I have some right over here.
I've got I used to wear silver ones at my cargo job. I had a fresh new shiny pair that I would wear, and then I had my old ones I got when I started that are just disgusting. They're shredded and they're just dark and danky, and my pilot shirts don't look like that. My pilot shirts are all grayed out because of me rolling around in grease.
It's like cotton.
Dirty ropes.
So could I unbutton this and
Sure.
slide it out and like put another one in? Is this standard?
Yeah.
Okay. Across any regional sort of.
Well, if you're flying for certain carriers, they're gold. If you're flying for other carriers like United, American, and another one that I'm maybe Alaska.
I feel like the majority are silver.
Okay.
The majority are silver.
or bronze. I think UPS is like they've got like black with thin
Brown.
thin brown. Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
just? Whoops. Is that just taste? Is that
it's company
you're
standard.
reaching a certain.
Company standard or.
If you show up with gold epaulets when your company wants silver, not only are you going to get made fun of,
you're gonna get a talking to.
you're going to get a talking to.
I see.
The hell's on your shoulders?
Yeah.
Do you get roasted a lot in this field?
Absolutely. Unless you're the roaster like Marco. I feel like he just shows up and just stinks on everyone.
Oh, Marco's the roaster.
No, I'm not. I'm not there to ruin anybody's day, but
You give and take.
no. What makes you say that?
Okay.
Ooh.
Maybe I'm getting stomped on then.
No. I mean,
No, like you badger each other. It's I don't know, you're screwing around.
no.
Or am I getting bullied? Do I need to
No,
seek,
no,
do I need to
no.
seek help?
I think it kind of depends on the situation, the scenario. And I'm not saying like I'm a bully in the airport or anything like that. It's,
I guess
Delta right now is, I don't want to say striking, but they're picketing their company because they've been under a contract negotiation for so long.
also known as striking.
Yeah. So they are like a part of their protest is we're not going to wear the hat. So if I see you, and this will kind of give it away with who we fly for, is as Delta's wholly owned regional carrier, if I see you wearing the hat, not as a line check pilot, you're not really supporting the cause. You're kind of like,
Ooh.
look at me, I'm a pilot.
I feel like that's kind of different than the point I was trying to make. Like, there's banter and then there's stuff like that where like, oh, you're not one of us. You're not a scab, but you're not helping out with the situation.
Yeah, and like that's the only time I'll give it out. I won't necessarily give it out because I'm not gonna pull you aside in the airport and be like, why are you wearing that fucking hat? Like I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, take it off, buddy. What do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
Not helping us. No, I'm not gonna do that.
What is the most draining part of the job? Something that is like your least favorite thing to do.
Dealing with what's not in the training department. Dealing with the unruly passengers, taking on delays that are just uncalled for or delays that are out of your hands, explaining it to passengers that don't get it.
But yeah, they don't understand. Weather delays, air traffic control delays. Hey, we've got to sit on the ramp for 2 hours and you can't go anywhere because they can't fit us in just yet.
And our Wi-Fi is not working.
What?
Not the Wi-Fi.
Not the Wi-Fi.
Well, the plane I fly doesn't even have Wi-Fi equipped.
You know what, Marco? The planes I used to fly had ashtrays. I don't want to hear
Ours have
about
ashtrays.
Ooh.
Really?
Yeah, and
wow,
the joke
okay.
the joke is we have dinosaurs hidden in the ashtrays because that's how old our planes are.
There
We have
used
toy
to be
dinosaurs.
a YouTuber, I think his name is Shay Carl, that used to put quarters in the ashtrays that were left over, and it was like this big trend. So you put dinosaurs in it. Is like the model dinosaurs? Is that just you for funsies, or is that across the table?
It sounds like an inside
Everybody
joke.
kind of does
It's
it.
an inside joke.
Love
Okay.
inside jokes. Hope to be a part of one.
Yeah, no, and
Oh, Nate.
you know, the most recent one for us is people are, you know, kind of like posting pictures of them holding staples, you know, staplers, hoping to just be stapled to the bottom of Delta's employee list and making us just one common company. But I don't want to get too deep into that,
All right,
because
'cause I was
that's
gonna
just a
ask what
whole
staplers had to do
whole
with
nother
it.
deal.
Okay.
It's another inside joke.
I understand. All right.
Allegedly.
You touched on some stereotypes, but are there any stereotypes or cliches that you would like to take this platform to debunk? Like, it is not true that pilots do XYZ. It is not true that planes do this.
First of all, I want to clear the record and say that we absolutely do X, Y, and Z. Just so we're all perfectly clear and on the same page here.
All right. Look, before we go down Denzel Washington's movie The Flight,
Yes.
that is not how things work here.
That movie gave me an aneurysm.
Yeah. So it's more along the lines of pilots just sit there and babysit the electronics. Yeah. You know,
For
it's
80% of it, yeah, I would say that's fair, because you're at cruise, you're at altitude. There's not a whole lot for you to be doing besides monitoring systems, checking electrical loads, and then you go back to
checking your email.
no, not using electronic devices. You know, reading your
So you
magazines.
say,
Get
oh,
real.
okay. So not on your phone, but can you like bring in a magazine and just flip through
You
it?
can use your phone. It's okay if it's in airplane mode
for
as
reading
suggested.
material.
Okay.
You know, that's okay. It's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's company-issued iPads and stuff in most airlines
Yeah.
nowadays. So
Like, if you need to reference a document, you can absolutely reference a mobile device if it's in airplane mode,
now, if you're
which I never forget
using
to do.
airplane Wi-Fi to FaceTime Joe Schmo, then which you can't do. I know. I'm just making a point.
I
Yeah.
see.
So, but you know, there are things that, like, the one thing I do want to debunk, and this isn't to scare off anybody from flying, but not every airplane is perfect,
Oh.
right? Every airplane does have some kind of, or not every airplane, quirk.
Every airplane has a quirk.
Or a maintenance flaw. There might be some systems that are inoperative but are still legal to fly without, meaning you might not have an autopilot. You might not have the multifunction display. You might not have anti-ice. You might not have
Certain parameters withstanding in an airplane's type certificate manual
the
that'll
one that-
allow you to do that stuff, though.
the one that bothers me the most is the in-op APU. Oh God, I hate that.
Oh, you had APUs? We had APUs on some of our stuff, but
Okay, so
sometimes they work.
The auxiliary power unit, we mainly use it for electrical function, but it's the lifeline for the
Bleed air to start the engines.
well,
and the
that.
electrical
But
power.
like the most important thing on a hot summer day is what to you?
Air conditioning.
There you
Air
go.
conditioning.
Yeah.
We don't have that on the ground. It gets hot in Atlanta.
That's
I
another
see.
function
Right.
of the bleed air. That's turned. That bleed air is taken from the engine, thrown into the air cycle machine, treated, and thrown into the cabin for everyone to enjoy themselves.
Ooh.
We don't have air conditioning. I
Meep
mean,
moop.
So you mentioned that there were some things that might pop up where the plane is still operational.
So that's kind of like our bread and butter, right? Well, we're not talking like in-flight emergencies or anything like that.
no, I think that's what she's kind of getting at. Where
It
like
could
things
be.
come up during flight.
well, yeah.
and,
Could be.
Like
Well, that's where the-
things
Let's
break in
talk
flight
about
too.
Well, that's what the paycheck comes from. Is we're there for the emergencies and the abnormals and all that sort
Right.
of stuff.
It's all good and kosher until it's not. Until we're trained up to both engines going out and keeping everybody on board alive. That's what we're trained to do.
Yeah. And that's why I don't think you'll see, just kind of a divergent point here. I don't think that you'll see a whole lot of single pilot or automated passenger flights in our lifetime, because as any programmer will tell you, as good as they are nowadays, and the guys at Airbus and Boeing are the guys, but
And
there are coding. It's not 1+1.
no.
Computers are subject to faults and failures and logic errors and all sorts of stuff like that.
And the other part of that too is when things go wrong, when you take solely into consideration the captain that landed that Airbus on the Hudson and everybody was standing on the wings, there's that iconic picture.
Oh, is that the guy that got the movie made of him?
Yes.
Played by
Right.
Tom Hanks.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Sully, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Sully.
Cool.
That was a scenario that they've never trained to before, right? And that's never happened to anybody before. And he reacted off of instinct. So that plays a certain scenario, if you will. But for the most part, nobody rises to the occasion when things go wrong.
Oh.
Everybody descends to their training. And
Well,
that's the way that it goes.
Yeah, that's the point.
That's why the paycheck comes in the way it does.
But that wasn't an incredible feat, and I think he reacted appropriately, especially considering the scenario
of course.
and the circumstances, and the fact that most water landings, if not all, save a few, end disastrously. They don't end well
They're
for
not
passenger
boats.
jets.
They're
No.
boats, but they're not
They
boats.
cartwheel, the wings split off, something goes, you hit uneven waves. It doesn't end well typically. So
I
what
see.
happened was pretty amazing.
Is there a percentage? Like I've interviewed EMTs that say it's 90% not shit, 2% oh shit. Is there a kind of variable that you guys would offer where it's like, yeah, most are good except for like, I don't know, the errant or
I feel like there's not a whole lot that could make you really, really go, oh shit. You get an engine fire, well, you know how to deal with that.
oh okay.
You've got one engine left to go. You get a second engine fire, that's oh shit. But you still got a glider.
Have you ever put butter on bread before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you have a really good landing, we call that a buttered landing.
Okay.
I've had a couple moments where I've literally looked over at my captain, or not looked over because I'm looking down the runway. I've been like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then just because I thought I was like losing airspeed too quickly, or, because I'll ask you another question. You've been on a boat before.
Yeah.
The bigger the boat, the bigger the wake,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Same thing.
The same thing works with airplanes. The vortices come off of the wingtips. It's wake, but it's just in the air and you can't see it. So we got cleared to land behind a freaking A350 coming from God knows where. Those are like the flights that come from Paris, Amsterdam,
Primarily
Seoul.
international, large passenger operations.
Yeah, the biggest airplanes, they create the biggest wake. And we have the smallest commercial airliner coming into land behind this big, large passenger jet. And they will say, clear to land, caution wake turbulence. Right? And that will roll you every which way to Sunday.
It's flipped airplanes before.
Really?
Yeah. And I've landed behind those airplanes thinking to myself, having that kind of like, oh, like, oh, this is getting a little squirrely, and then just putting it right on the runway.
And then it's buttered.
Yeah, and then, like the worst day for the pilot for landings is beautiful sunny day, no wind.
Really?
Yeah, because then you don't have an excuse.
Oh, I
You
see.
blew it.
Yeah, but no, honestly, it's a little bit easier, in my opinion, to land with, like a 20-knot cross. I've had my best landings are in the worst weather conditions.
Okay.
And my worst landings...
Because you're on top of it. You're mentally...
Oh, I'm
You're
there.
there. Yeah.
Right? And then on the
Ready to
clear,
rock and
sunny
roll.
days, it's like, all right, coming in for landing. Boom, boom, we're here. Take that, Detroit.
Surprise. That's funny. So,
Yeah.
Murphy's Law states that
Oh,
anything that
God.
can go wrong will go wrong. What is something that perhaps is often overlooked or forgotten that you need to just make sure that you flip this or check this or
Oh,
go
so
through
that's
it?
I mean, that's just like part of the train. Not that I have been trained in the company's SOPs, but all my training to date, you're checking and rechecking your work because complacency is a killer.
Okay.
So, you get comfortable, you start just doing your flows, you don't verify your work, that's when problems start popping up. So, the idea is you're doing some sort of scan every 10 to 15 minutes, right? Checking, rechecking that work, making sure you flip that switch, making sure that the power setting is where it needs to be, making sure that, we're not approaching our stall speed and, we're about to start plummeting towards the earth at 4,000 feet a minute.
Right, and a stall is where the airplane stops flying. That's what a stall is.
Is it like a car stall?
Yeah, sure. Let's compare it to that. It's when
Okay.
it stops driving. It's when it stops flying.
Mm.
Right? Airflow is no longer moving over the wing.
So you're a paperweight.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you just lower the nose, pick up a little bit of airspeed, start
Okay,
flying again.
so it's something that you can correct. It's not.
Oh
like,
yeah, no,
"Oh my
it's
God."
it's not a deal breaker
Yeah.
by any means. Now, stalling at lower altitudes
A little
is
scary.
different than stalling at higher altitudes, right?
And
You'll
there's
lose more
different
altitude at higher altitudes.
Yeah.
I see.
But you've got more altitude to play with.
Right. So it's not,
Oh.
So you stall
you
at-
can kind of look at both.
Stalling at 40,000 feet versus 4,000 feet, that's two different things we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's the same, but different. Same, but different.
I see.
Yeah, one of the more. So like our aircraft, we have multiple stall indication protection things. One being that you get a vibration in the controls. It's called a stick shaker.
Very intuitive.
Very yeah. And
It does what?
it starts, it's like
It shakes the stick.
and it's I don't even know how it does it. But
A little motor attached to the stick. Sorry.
there it is.
Anyways,
So if that's like your tall tail indication to lower the nose,
Okay.
right? To get that airflow back
So you
over the wings.
revert to your training. It's just what
Right.
you
So the
remember.
way
It's
if
instinctive
you've flown
at
in
that
the
point.
mountains, you kind of understand that the airflow can be a little bit weird coming off of the different coming in through the different valleys and things like that. We're coming into Roanoke, and there was some interesting winds aloft, and we got the stick shaker nowhere near our stall speed. Right, we just got that random gust, and it just gave that pitot tube, which is how we get our airspeed. That quick. Air's no longer there. We're in trouble, right? And I got that, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like I'm sitting there, like, "Oh my god, what's happening?" And we continued on because we determined that it was coming off the mountain range. But the weirdest thing was I was thinking about that prior to coming into land because I had flown in Colorado before. I was like, I know how that air is operating today. We're going to get a really, air moves like water. And we're going to get that weird, rolling effect of wind coming off that peak, if you will.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, you continually bring up that you go back to your training, that I've flown this before, therefore
Oh, yeah.
I know. Is there such thing as being too long in the industry, where there are pilots where it's just like, oh boy, you need to
Yeah,
retire.
you have to retire at 65.
Oh, okay.
That's the cutoff. You're not allowed to. You're
that's
no
it.
longer. And they're trying to combat the legislation right now to allow you to fly to 67, but everybody's like, no, we're not doing that. At 65, you have to retire.
Another side of that point is there's absolutely a point where you're a Mr. Know-It-All. You've been there, you've done that, and that's something that the modern aviation industry has really tried to train out of people. It's more about the crew, not just the captain owning that airplane, because when it's one stream of input, there's more margin for error. So they've definitely put a big emphasis on a captain, senior captain, taking into consideration more input from the flight crew.
And I don't want to, put this on the older generation, but there's a pattern. The older you get, the more health issues you run into.
Oh, okay.
So you have to maintain a certain medical standard to keep flying. It's called a first class medical in order to act as pilot in command, the captain's seat.
Okay.
So you do have to maintain a certain medical integrity, if you will. And over the age of 40, you have to get a check every 6 months. Which includes an EKG.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So what is something that'll take you off the roster? Is color blindness a thing? Oh, a seizure.
Seizure's a no-go.
Okay.
Color blindness. Now that they have corrective lenses for that, I wonder. No, but even then,
the corrective lenses are illegal. So, again, painting a target on my own back here because it might help somebody else out. I do have a very slight. I have a very slight deficiency, which I don't know if it's genetic or it came out of nowhere or whatever, but just very, very, very particular shades of red and green. I don't pick up, but like all screens in an airplane, I pick up no problem. Lights, everything that they use in the industry, I pick up no problem. It's just like certain like.
If you pass the medical test.
Oh yeah, no, it's
then that's all that matters.
It's no factor, and I typically only miss one sheet, or one of those things anyway.
But if your AME is determining that you're fit for a first class medical,
oh yeah, no,
who gives a shit?
I've had multiple AMEs say, hey, you might need to address this down the line. Just check some boxes, but you're good to go. Yeah. And there's definitely guys out there that have it worse than I do. But if anyone that listens has that sort of case going on, I just want to say, just have faith in your AME. There's stuff out there, and don't panic.
Yeah, don't give up, bro.
And I was once upon a time I was denied a medical.
Oh. Yeah,
and I had to go through different hoops to obtain a first class medical. So, and I was, there's different medicals to obtain, first, second, and third class, and we don't have to go, I don't, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what goes into the specifics of it, but in order to act as pilot in command of an aircraft that weighs over, what's the ATP?
12.5?
12,500 pounds, you have to have a first class medical. And it's a little bit more strict. So there are certain medications you can't take. There's certain vision requirements we have to meet. Hearing, blood pressure has to be.
The hearing test is really, really, really in depth. Basically,
really?
the doctor
walks
to the other side of the room, turns his back, and says something like this. In a little bit of a kind of a quieter tone of voice. And if you can hear him, he goes, "Great, you're good to go."
That's funny.
And
which I don't know about you, but I've flown in some loud airplanes, so I'm definitely
Well, it's crazy because these airplanes, they have volume control now. It's fucking wild.
We used to just have on the 7.2, we just had to scream at each other.
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
So
no, we have
loud in general.
Yeah.
You can tune up, you can turn up or turn down, the volume of the person that's talking to you.
In the headset.
In the airplane. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the old joke that the old guys back in the day had, and I flew with an old Eastern captain that told me this. How can you tell the 7.2 crew apart from everybody else in the FBO? they're the ones by the water cooler screaming at each other in a quiet room. You know, because I mean, these airplanes, you know, these old airplanes weren't padded so well, and we've got these freighters where they strip out everything to make, you know, as much room as possible for freight.
Okay.
And then, you know, we had two of the FedEx -217 re-engined versions, so they were way overpowered, way fast. But yeah.
All right. So what kind of other sounds do you encounter? I imagine you're flying, and if you hear one sound, it's like, I shouldn't be doing that.
There's certain sounds are more worrying than the others.
Okay.
Well, you tell. Yeah. Well, there's the master caution, and then there's the, you know, master warning. Master warning comes with 3 chimes versus the master caution comes with 1 chime. If you hear the 3 chime, something's really wrong.
Ooh.
Yeah. Talking engine fire or compartment fire or something like that.
Something's going on like that, right? Duct fire.
You know, it'd be
fire.
paired with a red annunciator light like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So if the audio is not working, the light's working, right? Something like that. For me, the thing that always makes my heart sink is the galley cart from the flight attendant. When they shove it into its place and lock it in, it sounds like the service door is opening and we've just had a major decompression of the aircraft.
Oh.
And I can feel it in my seat when they push it back. I'm like, dunk. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? What was that? And every time I think like either the decompression has happened or the nose gear has opened up. But then you get used to it. And you're like,
the nose gear the coney thing in the middle or in the front?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Now, see, I've had a decompression issue before, and that's it was a non-violent one. So I've had to what?
Nothing.
Okay. I've had we had a scenario where we did lose pressure and made an emergency descent into El Paso, and it's like, whew, man, it's crazy how you know, even in like a big fire emergency scenario. I mean, that's an emergency scenario, but like, you know, in something like that, it's crazy. You don't even notice it at first, especially like a slow leak. Slow leaks are more dangerous than like a rapid decompression or something like that, because you're not going to immediately notice it. So, you know, the gauge is going down. Everyone's starting to feel a little euphoric, a little bit woozy, and all of a sudden, you know, me and the crew's all looking around at each other, and somebody goes, "Okay, masks on."
Oh,
And
is that symptom of being at such high altitude?
Yeah, so that's called hypoxia, where there's a lack of oxygen in your blood. You know, and that particular scenario. It's hypoxia. So there's just not enough altitude for your body to grab out of the air and put into your system through your, what are they called, aeoli or whatever, brachii.
You would know more than I.
Oh, okay. Well. Yeah, so scenarios like that are super dangerous, because especially there's been multiple scenarios where somebody doesn't catch it, and
I'm curious. Like Florence Nightingale was a hero for nurses. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger is a role model for bodybuilders. Is there like a hero for pilots? Marco's pumping his fist.
So the go-to hero for pilots is always going to be Chuck Yeager. That's going to be the number one answer you'll hear from everyone, because, you know, I mean...
For you?
Oh,
did you find one on Google just now?
No, no, keep going. I'll tell mine.
So, yeah, Chuck Yeager, you know, he was P-51 pilot, flew, you know, his whole life he was a military guy, flew the
P-51
Bell X-2, yeah, no, what does he know? Fighter race and all that.
Most pretentious owned aircraft in the world is a P-51.
He flew it during his military service, but okay. You know, for me, it's guys like James Sweat, and it's kind of an obscure name, but he was an old Wildcat pilot in the Pacific. I used to watch the show Dogfights as a kid, and it was like, you know, these not wartime documentaries, but these reproduction of these war scenarios and stuff like that, and I would talk about how you know, in these different theaters. Sorry, I'm fidgeting with that.
no, that's quite all right.
it would reconstruct these different scenarios, and it would talk about how guys like James Sweat in an underperforming aircraft compared to the Japanese A6M0 would outperform, even with their underpowered aircraft, outperform their enemy and find different ways of thinking around them to beat them out. And until the F6 came along, and it would just became like putting on their shoes to them. What was the Red Baron's name? Max von Richthofen, something like that.
You're asking the wrong guy.
That's probably if you were to ask this question 40, 50 years ago, that would be a big name, I'm sure. How about you?
Yeah, who's your hero, Marco?
It can't be Tom Cruise.
No,
that doesn't count.
I was gonna make the joke, but there's only one person that I can really think of that's like a real true inspiration, but I only found this person just in like the last year and a half, and he's been around, right? But before that year and a half, it's been the mentors that I've had. It's been, I had a former students, Olivia Steen. Her dad, Greg, was one of like the original Harrier guys. Flies the 330 for Delta now, and I talk to him every other week, about an hour on the phone a day, and we chat, catch up, talk about the good. We also bitch about a lot of stuff. But the one guy that I think of when I hear hero is Brian Scholl. Mm-hmm. And Brian Scholl is a Vietnam fighter pilot that got shot down and got all these wild burns all over his body. And you'll have to forgive me. I can't remember exactly which branch of the military he was a part of, so I won't say, so I don't get scolded in case there are any military people out there.
Actually, Mark.
Yeah, exactly. But they basically said that he wasn't fit to fly. And he said, no, I will prove you wrong. And he eventually ended up being one of the most decorated SR-71 pilots of all time. The Blackbird.
You know who else flew that?
Who?
Chuck Yeager.
Anyway. But hey, look, that's great. I'm sure you've heard the joke of, LA Center, what's our ground speed?
Yeah, Mach 3, whatever.
That's Brian Scholl.
That's Brian Scholl.
That's Brian Scholl.
Oh, no kidding.
The
hotshot F-18 pilot thought he was cool at 500.
Right, and then and then he'll whatever their call sign was, it was something wild, for the SR-71. What's our ground speed? Yeah, we show you
1,400 knots across the ground.
No, it's more than that. It's like fucking like 12. I don't even know what it is. It's just an obnoxious number.
Yeah, insane.
And you could hear a pen drop on the other side.
Yeah.
And the way he tells the story is just incredible. His book on eBay right now, you know how much that book goes for an original copy signed in 2003?
They don't make them anymore. So
Sled Driver is what it's called. It goes for $1,300.
Really?
And I want it.
Is that because it's signed?
This one is signed, actually, by Brian.
I see.
He gives an incredible speech that's on YouTube. It's about an hour long. And whenever, I usually listen to that whenever I feel like I'm in a corner and I feel like my back's up against the wall. And it definitely has me feeling like I can definitely overcome my heartaches because this guy had it worse.
Oh, that's...
I find those kind of motivational speeches, especially Brian Scholl's because he's a pilot, to be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you just mentioned like getting out of a funk and that sort of thing. And then earlier in the podcast, you mentioned plateaus. Do you guys have any personal experiences with hitting that plateau?
Oh, absolutely.
God, yeah, 100%.
I wanted to backtrack at some point. Before I do that and forget again, I also wanted to mention another pilot that not only for me, but just a for a huge amount of pilots. I mean, he's a staple in like pilot training now because of a lecture he gave to an American Airlines class. That's not
Goose?
they've recorded.
Was it Goose?
No, it was Iceman.
Fucker, where are you listening? No, it's a guy named Captain Warren Vanderberg. He's passed now, but basically his work has prevented probably quite a few deaths and quite a few accidents. Based on his lectures of terrain avoidance, GPWS, wind shear, stuff like that.
Yeah.
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 He's got a lecture called Children of the Magenta.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is excellent material.
It's older material and it's
he's
harder to follow for the younger generation of pilots, but the Children of the Magenta was the American Airlines pilot that I had mentioned earlier that I ran into in Phoenix. One of the main focuses that we went through was the Children of the Magenta that he had mentioned. And I remember that video. I haven't watched it since, but that is really good material. Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
Probably watched that a couple times now, but yeah, an old F-100 pilot, so he knows what he's talking about because that was a squirrely airplane.
Yeah.
That killed a lot of guys. It was so fast but so unstable just because of the wing design and stuff like that.
I see.
But yeah, moving on to personal plateaus and stuff, I would say absolutely. I mean, through my own pilot training, I had several. And the best thing I can say is, whatever you do, don't give up. I mean, this was a lifelong dream of mine, and I almost hit that critical point of just saying, wow, can I do this? And luckily, you'll run into people, and this is where I met Marco. Me and him had a mutual friend. I use that term loosely. We had a mutual friend, and me and Marco started hanging out, and every time I had a problem, Marco was there stepping up to the plate to help me out, making sure I, pull me up by the scruff of my neck like a little kitty. And
no, it's just you would have done it for me. We had that rare.
Well, there's a difference of perspective here, in case you couldn't tell, but he definitely helped me along in a very, very critical phase of my life.
So yeah, but so did you. And that's that part that I talked about earlier. Is like you'll never be able to thank the person next to you. Just pay it forward. And that kind of becomes like the common denominator in aviation. It's like, hey, I'll help you pick up the slack over here. I'm sure you'll play a part, in my training or my career at some point in another. And we've both kind of played that part for each other.
And you don't really understand that until you've lived it. Like, I had no idea what he was talking about when I first heard all this stuff, until I reached a point in my career where people were asking me questions. People were coming to me for answers and advice. And it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, how did that feel?
That's odd. A couple of my brother's friends wanted to become pilots. I don't know if because of me doing it or whatever, but I'll just pat myself on the back and say that yes. But yeah, I mean, you realize that, like, when people are serious about this is something that they wanted to do. They've probably dreamed about it for a while. And if you can be that positive force that pushes them along and helps them get to the other side of that objective, then that's an incredibly rare privilege.
Yeah.
So
I flew in the cockpit. We have the privilege of flying what's called jump seat. There's a third seat, sometimes 3 and 4, in the flight decks of these airliners, and you get to sit up front with the flight deck. If you're going to from work, maybe you're going home, maybe going to vacation, the flight didn't have any seats for you in the back, so you get to fly up in the cockpit with the pilots. And I always would say, looking out the window, this is the best job in the world. I would say it out loud. Hearing it from a person that was 63, 2 years left, for him to say that, he would say something along those lines. Oh, it's the best view of all time. And then his first officer says, "So you gonna miss it?" He goes, I don't know. We'll see.
The answer is
until
yes.
it's gone.
Yeah, the answer
until
is
it's
yes.
gone. Don't know what you had until it's gone.
Once those guys lose their wings, that's when it really starts to hit them. It's not when they're, it hits them a little bit when they're walking off that jet bridge for the last time. But once they're sitting at home for a couple of weeks and they have time to soak it in, then they go, "Holy shit, that passed me by so fast."
And me in particular, like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but this is something that I've realized at 27, year one into my airline career. It's like every time I step foot into a flight deck, it's like, really kind of embrace it, because this isn't forever. A lot of people work that 9 to 5. But back to what we were kind of talking about earlier is, we've really appreciated our training, and we've really appreciated each other's company along the way, to get to where we are now today. And now it's coming full circle, because now we're getting to fly for the same company, and it's looking pretty good for us moving forward. I mean, the contract negotiations are just on fire for pilots right now, and
this is the best it's ever been for pilots.
Yeah, this absolutely is the best it's ever been.
There used to be regional pilots that would be sleeping in their cars in the parking lot because they were being paid so little.
And now we're seeing it as, when COVID was at its peak, Delta said, we don't need the top whatever percent it was of their senior pilots. So they gave them a retirement option.
Oh.
Most of them took it. When we came back from COVID, we were back up and running 100%. We could not keep up with the demand. So the demand for a pilot right now has skyrocketed. And unfortunately, right now, today, pilots are an undervalued asset to a company, because we are operating domestically 90% and internationally like 65% last I checked, 70%.
Yeah.
And these numbers are just under pre-COVID numbers, simply because of staff.
And I mean, it's only going to be a battle of attrition for the next 10 to 20 years, because you've got, thanks to certain things like, crashes throughout the decades. I mean, you had the '08 crash. That was a big one. You had 9/11 that caused the crash, and definitely a cease in
the
in
Colgan crash in 2012 changed the entire industry as far as to how many hours you need to fly a jet.
They basically rewrote the book because of that one.
Yeah. It used to be you could go to an airline with 300 hours?
Yeah.
Now you can't touch flight controls without 1,500 hours unless you go to a specified university, which is what we attended.
So when you see this problem on the news about the pilot shortage, we're talking about a multi-tier problem here, because you've got guys leaving faster than they're being replaced, and you most definitely cannot replace those decades of flying experience. And for the longest time, and especially now, the cost of entry into this career field was, and absolutely is right now, especially, absurd. So it's hard to get into unless, no offense to anybody out there, mommy and daddy's got the tab covered, or, the unfortunate circumstance that I find myself in, and I know a lot of other students find themselves in. You're going to a bank and you're taking out these student loans. It's a big bill to pay at the end of the day. And I know what I signed. I'm not complaining. I'm not looking for anything, but you're asking for a really, really, really big commitment here. And yeah, so at the rate that people are signing up, and even right now with the numbers exploding of people training, they're looking at 10 to 20 years at the very least of pilot attrition in the industry.
So there's no acceleration. There's no we need them, so get them out.
They're trying.
They're trying, but it's such a complicated industry right now with these types of things that are going on. It's becoming a real problem. They don't know how to retain pilots. Everybody's jumping ship to each other's companies, trying to figure out what's the best path for me to go from A to B. Now that might have to include A, B, C, D.
Well,
right?
Here's the thing: is for the first time in a very, very, very long time, there's a path where it's A to C via B in that sort of scenario, instead of running through the entire alphabet of steps to try and get to that dream goal of Delta, American, United, and
Those
you
are the big
talk
three
to
carriers that everybody wants to go fly for.
Because you talk to these old captains, these old freight captains or whatever, or these old some of these guys you find in the airlines. It took them 15 years to get into a jet. It took me
even longer.
It took me less than a month.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you remember you went through all your schooling and training, so it took you about how many years? From
all right, that was my question. They didn't put you off a plane in a month.
You started flight
but for those guys,
getting into a jet, it took you 4 years.
But for what those guys are saying, it's from that commercial license to the jet.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, commercial license to flying a jet.
And I will say that's very lucky, but it can happen.
Yeah. And there's all these different avenues. Unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that if you want to go to Delta, you shouldn't fly for Delta's regional airline. If you want to fly for American, you shouldn't fly for American's regional airline. It almost deters your ability to go and fly for this airline. That's what today's culture is.
I guess I don't understand what you're saying.
It's a complicated thing. So you're essentially...
So the regionals, they try to basically set up these contracts, and Delta owns their regional wholly. So they basically want you to sign up with these regionals and stay there for a couple of years and help feed those smaller routes and stuff, right?
But if you went to another carrier's regional, you have more of an opportunity to go to where you would like to be.
There's more likelihood of you sidestepping your way to captain rapidly, and then interviewing at Delta mainline and getting that job probably 2 years quicker than...
We call it drinking the Kool-Aid.
Drinking the Kool-Aid.
That's what it is.
PFM.
PFM. Yeah, PFM. There it is again. So that's been going on for 2.5 years, 3 years. That's coming to a quick stop.
Oh, okay.
They're catching on to it.
They're catching on to it. So a lot of people would go from SkyWest, Endeavor, PSA, Piedmont, Envoy, before the new contracts. They would go to Spirit or Frontier or Southwest. Now, contrary to your belief, Spirit has one of the best pilot contracts on the market. They take extremely good care of their pilots.
This is good to know.
They take extremely good care of their aircraft, and they take very good care of their flight attendants.
Yeah, it's really weird to hear, but that Spirit was, even though they're being bought up by JetBlue, they were one of the better companies to work for.
So why is it that they got such a bad rap then?
Because of what happens behind that secure flight deck door.
Right.
Well,
so
in regards
as far as passenger goes, when you buy a Delta ticket, right, you're paying for water, soda, In some seat circumstances, some seat configurations, Comfort Plus, Business Plus,
You're paying for an
First
experience.
Class, Delta One, you are getting free alcohol, a blanket, a pillow.
Whereas
Thank you for being a million miler. Thank you
we're
for choosing
so-
Delta.
We're so grateful you're
We're so
here.
grateful that you're here.
Whereas when you buy a Spirit ticket, you're really just buying a bus ticket.
You are phone, keys, and wallet to your destination. That's what a Spirit ticket is. Now, you need a carry-on? That's a fee. You want water? That's a fee.
You want
to-
peanuts? Are you out of your mind? $5.
Fee. Checked bag, fee. You want to bring your nephew with you? Fee. You had a kid last year? Fee. It's
You're spilling into the next person's seat.
fee.
Fee, which is fair.
You were born in October? Fee.
This has been the second part of a 3-part series for pilots. I hope you learned more. I know I did. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for part 3. Follow me at Takes One to Write One on Instagram and Pinterest, and vibe to my curated playlists on Spotify. Until then, I'm Katherine Arcady, and remember, it takes one to write one.